You're listening to the Dear Church podcast.
Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears. Oh, let's do it again. Feel your ears. I don't want to feel your ears. Okay. I don't do this part, so. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. I am not Sam Yang. My name is Eugene Kim. I'm the pastor here at the Church Gathered and Scattered, and my usual criminal partner, not partner in crime, criminal partner, isn't here with us today because Sam Yang just had a baby. Adeline Soyu Yang was born on December 15th, and we just want to give Sam a big congratulations on being a newfound dad. I'm also very proud of Angela, his wife, and I heard Sam had almost passed out multiple times during the labor. That is disappointing, but it is not unexpected. But today we have with us the elders of CGS. They'll be joining me in our podcast as we go over the topic of church elders. And specifically, we'll go over the marks for elders that's written out for us in Titus chapter 1. In other words, what they need to be and what they need to be able to do. But before that, I like to go over why the church needs elders. But even before that, let me go around and introduce the elders to you. Well, we'll have them introduce themselves to you. Why don't we start here?
Hi, my name's Ho Young Lim. I am the youngest elder out of our session, father of 2 girls, and married to my wife, Christine.
My name is Sammy Lee. I am the newest elder as of 7 days ago. I'm married to my wife, Sarah. I have 2 kids, Silas and Sophia, that many of you guys know.
Hi, this is Sung Kim, just an elder. My wife, Hannah, and I have a young daughter, Willow.
Well, you have to have a superlative. What about the heaviest elder?
Fine, I'm the heaviest elder.
I don't think you are. But yeah.
I'm pretty sure I am.
And we have here the lightest elder.
Yes, my name is Jubin. I have 1 son and a daughter on the way. And I am the lightest elder here. Not the youngest or the oldest.
My name is Paul Jang. I guess I am the most seasoned in terms of age, but married to Joy, 3 kids, Hope, Martin, and Calvin, and I'm glad to be here.
All right. And so these are the elders of our church. This is what we call the session. And we want to go over why the church itself needs elders. And so this is what Titus chapter 1:5 says when Paul is writing to Titus. He says, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you." So the number one thing we want to point out why church needs elders is because this is what Paul had directed as something that we would say as normative, even regulative. This is what we want to say is the norm for churches to have a bunch of elders, but to have qualified elders, to have a plurality of elders. And you may have heard this kind of language in our podcast before. And so this is why we even pick out the words. This is what Paul says. This is not for every town, but is in every town. So this is not an elder that oversees all the towns. It's an elder. These are elders that are in every town. And number 2, this is for the ordering of churches. This is why every church has elders. One of the key jobs of an elder is to reform that church according to the word of God. So now that we have that laid out, let's get to the nitty-gritty that Paul tells Titus to look for in elders, and this is why we have our elders here and why it's important. So I'll ask the question, and maybe whoever is comfortable, you guys can jump in and you can answer. Number 1, Paul says elders need to be above reproach. This is something that we hear often. Elders need to be above reproach. We even see it on 1 Timothy chapter 3. What does that even mean, and why is it important?
I think it has to do with just the character of the elder, the I guess, the respect that the elder has. I think it's important because the God gives a calling, but the church affirms that elders and that call. And so, if they are not of good character, how can they be someone that the church will affirm to be the elder of their church, to oversee their church? And so, I think it's important that someone who is called to be an elder has that respect, has that good character, not just, I guess, in their family life, but also in the way that they work and serve the Lord, and also in the way that in their own personal life, in the way that they handle themselves. So,
Pastor Paul, are you above reproach?
I'm striving to be. I think the word above reproach sometimes can be translated like blameless or guiltless. I think ultimately we can only be truly blameless and guiltless because of Christ. But I think we take that seriously, recognizing that we're not just representing ourselves. And I think, of all, being committed to live that life of higher standard, knowing that we'll be judged more harshly.
When we talk about above reproach, and what Sung said is pretty solid, it needs to be someone of high quality and character, someone that people can look up to. I think that's what it is. Above reproach means someone looks up to them. Someone that is not above reproach is someone that people just don't respect. And it doesn't mean that that person is perfect in that sense, the above reproach part. Otherwise, no one could be an elder. And so you need elders. And so who is the man that God has set aside that the church can clearly see that is someone of elder quality, someone above reproach, someone who he has set aside, has given godly character to? I think that's what this really means. And this is why it's so important, because if no one respects the elder, that's a problem. And the way that someone does get respected in a godly society is they exhibit godly qualities, godly character. That means they have to be along the lines of sanctification, at least further on than the congregant or the other members. Otherwise, you're not above reproach. You're just, your peer. So an elder does have this very high calling and high standard to them. And I think it's important, because if not, we can't say what Paul is telling elders to say too, when he says things like, imitate me as I imitate Christ. We are to imitate even the Apostle Paul in the way he teaches Timothy, the way he teaches the Corinthians, the way he's teaching Titus. And so elders do have a very high call, and it is daunting in many ways. And that's why to be above reproach is, I think, one of the first things that's written. Let me ask Jubin the next question. The husband of one wife. Jubin, why don't you have more than one wife?
Because God said so.
Well, it's about the family. So let's just put it together. A husband of one wife, children are believers and not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. Yeah, what do you think about that? And why are these qualities important?
These are definitely important because, especially as leaders, I think we are held to the higher standard. And like the previous question said, when the church sees us leading our family and how our family is made up, I think that's how they see the elder also leading the church. And so having one wife, making sure your children are disciplined, things like that, kind of show how we are able to shepherd the church as well. So when our house is in order, I think our church would also come along and being in order in how we teach and shepherd the members here.
Yeah, that's a great answer, I think. And maybe the follow-up question would be, if your children are insubordinate, does that disqualify you from being an elder? Or if you're an elder already, does that disqualify you from eldership?
Yeah, I think we've heard this question before from other discussions. And if you're already an elder and, you have little kids as we do now, and maybe later on kid when he's a teen, he's gonna, rebel, run away, and all that stuff. Then, does that make me like no longer qualified to be an elder? Those are touchy subjects because we know even well-known pastors who have children that have run away from the faith and actually denounce the faith and go against the church. And so, are they no longer qualified to be a pastor? I don't think so. It's not black and white like that, but I think that is something that I guess that family has to work on, and that pastor does need to work on and pray for. I don't think it necessarily disqualifies you as a pastor or an elder.
At what point would it disqualify you then?
Yeah,
I mean, it's speculative, right?
How are you going to draw the line, right?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? And then, does it interfere with you shepherding your church? Does it interfere with your devotion to God, and also how even the world sees you as a pastor, right? That above reproach isn't just about the church seeing you; it's even the world, right? Like, how do the people at your workplace see you? Is it the same?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on what Juben said, I think we live in a world where people are sinful in general, and there's a huge responsibility placed upon elders to lead the church well, right? To shepherd the flock well. Well, the simple question is, if you can't lead your own family well, how can your church trust that you can lead the church well? And it starts in the home first, right? So how well are you leading your wife? How well are you raising your kids to love the Lord, right? So if you can't raise your children to do this, right, there's that natural question of, well, how can this man lead our church? As far as what levels to disqualify an elder, I think that comes with wisdom from the session and, having continued, conversations about, how best we can lead. But I don't think there's a specific answer, right, to this leads to disqualification, right? I don't think the Bible doesn't list that out, right? So, to define debauchery and subordination, I think there needs to be, it's a process, right? And I think as we faithfully, in the best of our abilities, lead our families, we are hoping and praying that through the grace of God that we and our children do grow up loving the Lord, right? But to ask that question is a really tough question for us to answer. And we haven't lived through that yet, right? But maybe it's something that we may be challenged with in the future.
I think I shared this before too, but I think my kids are age 18, 16, 14, where they do understand the gospel. They do believe but do they go through seasons of insubordination at different seasons of life where they don't listen, or as they get older with their mind of their own and ability to speak back, and even we've gone through different seasons of time where like, how do you discipline a child who's like either not just like lying, but willfully kind of hiding things or trying to deceive. So I think when those seasons come, it's hard, and it's hard enough when you have a little kid who keeps saying no. But and I think what I've learned is the challenge of showing God's love, but being clear about what is sin, and disciplining the child when it's necessary.
I think one of the more important things that we are to notice is the language that Paul uses for Titus, and when it says the charge. So the charge of debauchery or insubordination is a serious thing. So when someone charges you for having children that are insubordinate or debauchery, that means, for example, you have like a 13-year-old kid that's going to like drunken raves. That's an issue if you keep on letting them do that. You got to lead your family well. So I think the answers were good. It's just a matter of what we should do then. Things like we should do with wisdom, discretion, for the sake of the church, for the sake of the elder. praying for them, helping them lead their family well is great. And like there can be a season where the elder just takes a break because they just can't handle it. They need to get their family back in order, and that's fine too. But they can't continue to be an elder if their family's in disarray. I think we're all in agreement with that, right? And so the family is so important because it points to how you will lead the church. How you lead your wife, how you lead your children is how you lead the church. And if you don't lead them well, people are not going to think that you will lead the church well. And so that's why you need to lead your family well. I think generally speaking, this is something that we need to do. After the family, so we're seeing here, it's going from the broad, above reproach is very broad. I think one of you mentioned it's not just inside, but outside, right, Jubin? And then here the family, and I was going inside into the household. And the next set of characteristics is personal. So next, personal. And you can't be arrogant, you can't be quick-tempered, you can't be a drunkard, you can't be violent, you can't be greedy for gain. And why do you think that's important?
These are very important qualifications for elders not to have, because these are the very things that can bring down a church. And it's an example that we are setting in our call to be an elder, is to show our congregation what it means to be above reproach. And what does that mean, right? So to be arrogant, right? Jesus was the most humble king ever, right? And that's who we're supposed to imitate. And if we're arrogant, we're going completely against what Scripture and who Christ is in our lives, right? You can quit going down the list, and all of these things don't point to Christ, right? And these are the things that we should not be doing, because we want to be an example in the manner in which we lead our church, right? So if I am violent all the time, right, that is not a good way for me to show and to live a life glorifying the Lord, right? To be greedy for gain for who? For my own personal, desires, right? But that's not why we exist. We exist to glorify the Lord, right? To being as selfless as possible as Jesus was. So it's great to kind of see that these are the things that we should not look for in a person, because these are the things that point away from the Lord.
Yeah, I also would like to add that these personal characteristics are in a negative, but they are what you might typically see in brand new members. Like you wouldn't see this in seasoned members. If they're seasoned and they're like this, they need to be disciplined because they have not been raised and they're not moving in sanctification. So an elder, definitely not, because these are like, just signs of someone who's a brand new Christian, who's still arrogant, who's still quick-tempered, who still is a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain. And they can definitely ruin the church when they have these qualities. The next is still personal, but it's the positive. And that's hospitable, lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. What's so good about them? Why do you think they're so good, Sammy?
The characteristics of being hospitable, being good, self-controlled, upright, holy, disciplined. They're good in many ways. As an elder, we're called to open up our homes and to be hospitable, to gain relationships with our members, even newcomers, people who've been coming out to our church for a very long time. We want to be self-controlled, to a degree where we're wise in all of our decision making, wise in the things that we say, do, act. We don't want to be, in a sense, acting without thinking correctly, without having the right mind or reason to act on certain things.
I mean, which personal positive quality really resonates with you as our newly ordained and installed elder?
I'm always a work in progress, but if you've known me for quite some time, I'm a very mild-tempered person. I don't. Most people will say I don't react at all to anything. I have no emotions to anything, whether it comes to sports or arguments or just celebrating good things. I think I'm very self-controlled. I don't act irrationally, uh, and I put a lot of thought into things before I speak, before I do things, and I think that's somewhat of a good quality where uh, you can have a self-control type of person, but at the same time, my decision making may take a little bit longer than someone else who is more quick to make that decision or quick to say certain things.
I think just a good temperament is something that should be sought after for all of us. And well, that's great. Last one I'll mention is verse 9. It says, "He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine and also to rebuke those who contradicted." I find it fascinating that Paul ends these characteristics that he's putting out there, from the grand to the very personal, finally to the ability to teach, and not just teach anything, but to teach sound instruction and sound doctrine. So much so that if they contradict that, you need to rebuke them. You need to have the ability to rebuke them. What was our church's experience in all of this? Can you recall anything?
Well, I'm sure Jubin and Sung definitely lived through this. When we, as a session, this is before I became an elder, actually. I was right on the cusp of being ordained, was this idea of complementarianism. And it was something that the session, through our reading and our learning, was coming to a place where, we believe this is to be the case because it's very clear in scripture. But we had not gotten to the point where we're teaching our church this, because there were more primary things that we were trying to teach our members, right? And so when it came out that we are not egalitarian, but we're complementarian, there was a lot of backlash in certain regards. And I really appreciated the session and just our unity and understanding that this is correct, because this is what we believe and we know to be true because God tells us this all over, from Genesis to Titus, right? And to Revelations, like it's all over. It's very clear.
Yeah.
That the headship in the house is the husband, and the men are certain men, right? Qualified men are chosen to lead the church. So that is really against a lot of the worldly of what the world tells us today, and having to teach that not just for ourselves, but starting with our deacons, and then teaching our small group leaders to our church. It was something that we had to stand firm on, right? And I know Pastor Eugene had countless conversations with different members of our church, people who are no longer here and people who are still here, right? And I think through that, we really matured a lot as a church. But it was a time where we had to teach people and tell them, like, this is to be true. And, I think the hardest thing was all of our wives are very strong personalities, right? And to even teach, like, I had a lot of conversations with my own wife, and I think Sung and Jubin could probably, and probably Sammy too, like, they all probably had conversations within their own household. And it wasn't easy for my wife to accept, right? Because she might say, the Bible does say this, but something about this doesn't sound right, right? And to be able to explain that, to go through that, and get us to a place now where we see that this is a beautiful thing in the manner in which the Lord has ordained it to be, it brings a lot more unity and leads our family in the right path, right? But that was probably the biggest thing that we had to go through, in from what I can remember.
Yeah, biggest thing so far. I mean, it kind of transitions nicely into the question that I had next, which was, what was maybe one of the hardest shepherding moments for you as an elder?
I'll share. I think when you walk with, let's say, a brother, and learning together, keeping them accountable to certain areas of and then you see them growing, maturing, and in moment of weakness they lapse, I think, and just those are probably discouraging. But ultimately, you go back and journey with them. But when the falls are big, it can be discouraging. I won't say it's the hardest moment, but it's a discouraging moment. But we remember that we're supposed to.
It's because
still-
you're like invested, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how can you be completely compartmentalized and cut off from the people that you shepherd? You're invested with your whole life as an elder, and so when you're teaching someone, you put your whole life energy into it. You put your body, soul, and mind into making them flourish and thrive as God has given you. What about the most encouraging?
I think for me, like, it's we have a lot of young men in our church, and I think us as elders, we're constantly trying to learn, understand exactly what the man, a Christian man, is supposed to be. And for our young men in our church, I think what has been encouraging is their willingness, their desire to understand and to learn. And yeah, like, I think there are discouraging moments too when they kind of fall back, or they continue to act a little bit maybe immature. But I do see a lot of our men who really do desire to understand what a man of God looks like, to be able to learn how to lead their families. I think as a church, we've been doing our best to teach that, and especially how to be a head of the household. I think that kind of came out of that discussion with complementarianism, and I was encouraged because of all the men I see in our church who want to take that seriously, and I think even more for us as elders to be able to model that for them. But it's encouraging that they are watching, and I think being able to know that and trust that our elders are doing our best to lead our family as well. But just kind of instilling that into our young men in this church. And I think they have quite a bit of ways to go, but they are really, I see that eagerness, that desire, and just, maturity kind of coming from them.
I think in addition, what's encouraging for me is I see other guys meeting up with other guys, going through books together. It always kind of fills my heart with joy when I see other guys meeting and kind of discipling each other or learning together. And I think as part of elders, we teach members or new members. We also interview them, and those who are hungry to learn more, or who are just brand new Christians, the desire and the willingness to learn, I think that's probably one of the most encouraging things, going through the gospel with them, going through a basic gospel book with them, and the eagerness and the hunger to learn has always been the most encouraging thing. And I think it's contagious in that sense, and I think it's just wonderful to see.
Yeah, I agree. Just want to say it's not just the men. I think our whole church, within the past 5 years, I think we started off as like this, like shy group of people that kind of just sit back and see what the leaders are doing, and then decide, oh, I like this church, or if I don't like this church, I'm gonna leave. But now we come to a place where, okay, I want to see what God is doing here. I want to hear His word, and I have lots of questions, and I'm willing to trust the leaders here to ask those questions, because I think before, no one actually ever came up to me and asked me anything. But within the past like few years, I have a lot of guys, asking me questions, just even like just about life in general and things that they need guidance and wisdom on. And yeah, so that growth is very encouraging. And then I do see that a lot of our members and people who come to our church are eager to learn and have a lot of discussions and questions about either certain passages or certain doctrines, or even some of the sermons that they hear. So yeah, it's been good.
I think for me, even though I've only been an elder for about 7 days, this is even before becoming an elder. Just seeing the growth of this church, both the men and the women who are eager to learn God's word and to be sanctified to change, to be more humble, serving. I think it's a huge encouragement when I see the men and women that show up every week, either on Saturday morning prayers or Sunday mornings, eager to help out in any way they can. One example is before our installation service last week, we had some gifts that we're going to distribute, and it was just the deacon and elder elects, but we had about 4 to 5 members of the church, including one very pregnant Angela Yang, that was willing. We didn't ask him, but they wanted to help, and that was a huge encouragement, knowing that we had a mother to be who was ready to deliver a baby at any minute, and just to see the smile on her face, assembling these gifts together with the elects. I think that was a huge encouragement to see. And after that, 5 more people started coming in. What would have taken us about an hour probably took us, 20, 25 minutes to assemble. And I thought, it's like, wow, this church really comes together to help at any event, whether they were asked or whether they were just passing by and they just saw, a group of people doing things. And I see that just in every event. I'll walk by these rooms, these classrooms that we see. People will pop in and will say, hey, do you need any help? Can I be of assistance? If it's for an event, I would love to be part of it. And I think that's very encouraging to see.
Okay. I mean, I think what's fascinating is, even from your answers, some of the most encouraging moments we've had as an elder and even in our spiritual lives are through the most difficult times in life. And I think that's just, a testament to God's goodness and his faithfulness over our church and our lives. As elders, we get to witness that firsthand. What a wonderful, wonderful thing we get to be when we serve God in this way. What about what you look forward to in the church? What are you guys looking forward to?
I think for me, what I look forward to is kind of goes hand in hand what is the most encouraging. So when I look at the average age of our church, it's in the low to mid 30s. We are very young as a congregation. And if you look at the session, outside of our teaching elders and Pastor Eugene and Pastor Paul, the ruling elders are young too. Right? We have young children. And for me, what's most encouraging is that even through that, the 4 of us get to go through life in all of our ways that we lack, that the church still affirms us, encourages us to be able to, and gives us the opportunity to lead them, right? And to me, that's the most humbling thing for me, as well as the most encouraging thing, that I get to walk alongside Sammy, Sung, Jubin, as well as Pastor Paul and Pastor Eugene in leading in this church, when I myself have such a long way to go in just my continued maturity, right? And I look forward to how our church will continue to grow and mature. We have a lot of babies in the next 3 years. There's going to be, our children's ministry is going to be, actually our nursery ministry is going to be like out of control. We don't even have one, right? And I see how many new mothers are going to be, how many new babies are on the way. And I look forward to being able to go through this journey with new parents and these young children that are coming up. And to me, that's what I'm most excited for.
What is the minimum number of children a family should have?
Well, I have 4, and I believe the Lord has told me 4 is very good. Other people are telling me otherwise, but I believe the Lord's telling me 4.
4 children.
No, 4 total, as in me, my wife, and my 2 kids.
You got
4
2
That is
children.
crazy.
He's like,
Let's
go.
I heard 4, brother.
I heard
Are you like not telling
4.
us something?
Yeah. Word is bond, and it is in
This is crazy.
our recording.
I was like, wow.
What about the rest of you guys? What are you guys looking forward to in the church?
I think for me, sort of along the same lines of what Hoyoung said, I look forward to witnessing the different seasons of life that our members are going to go through in the next several years. Um, more, more so for the new families that are going to be coming through, and how the men and will lead those families. I think that would be a great thing to witness, knowing that the teachings that they learn here, just to know what it means to be a man and to lead their household well. I think that will be a great testament of what is to come in the future for the children of CGS, how they'll grow up. And I really do think it's important for a family unit, especially the husband, to lead well in the house, especially when it comes to biblical teaching. There our kids will learn outside of the church and outside of the family, no matter what, whether it's in the school, friends, daycare, playground. But it's definitely more important to have that teaching available and taught well within the household, as well as biblical teaching in the church. So I do look forward to how these different seasons of life are going to kind of change and help grow this church in the next several years. And it'll be a very exciting season for a lot of people.
I'm excited to see Sam Yang as a father.
You might not see him for like 6 months
Oh gosh.
at this rate.
Sam's been stretched for like 6 months before he had to get it. So.
Stepped down from praise team like last week.
I think I just kind of seeing how our church has come along. You know, we've gone through a lot of challenging times, a lot of really amazing times, and I look forward to just how God is gonna kind of move at CGS. I think we have a couple of things that are upcoming, right? Like our lease is ending on this place, and Hoyoung is very stressed about it. But you know, I think our church has shown that trust and hope in what God will do for our church, and He will provide. And you know, I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, where we'll be this time next year. Maybe we'll be in a new building. Maybe we'll be here still. But like in those ways, it's just seeing how God has truly is so faithful, so amazing. Whether it's at CGS, whether it's within our own lives, I'm just looking forward to seeing how God will continue to move through our church. And again, you know, we are a young church. There's like 100 weddings this year, a lot of babies, and so it's again, like what Hoyoung and Sammy said, looking forward to just seeing these families grow and growing together.
Any words of affirmation, admonishment, exhortation, or encouragement to the church? Final words before we go into the next section that you want to say? I'll take it. I think one of the most amazing things that I got to experience is even in the toughest times. Let's say, for example, the whole complementarian issue. I actually have had women come up to me saying, "I trust you. I'm praying for you. I want you to continue to preach the word of God." These women have been foundational in my sanity, my spiritual well-being. I wouldn't be where I am without them. I'm happy that all of our ministries are becoming better and healthier, but you know, it's just a sign that our church is becoming healthier by the grace of God. So let's continue to do that and continue to, you know, hold fast to the truth that God has given us in His Word. Our next section is, I called it hot takes. The first hot take maybe we could get with is the question: should elders be friends in real life?
Yes.
Yes. We should be best friends.
Yeah.
I'm asking that because a lot of people seem to have this notion that elders should, number one, keep each other accountable. You should be my check. You know, I'm the senior pastor. You guys should keep me in check. You can't be my friend, then you got to keep a certain distance, right? I grew up even in the culture where if elders are too close with the senior pastor, then they might use some of the personal information that they have against the senior pastor somewhere along the line, down the line in some future.
But how do you keep him in check if he's not your friend? Like, I don't mind if my best friend comes up to me and says, hey, idiot, you're doing this wrong. But, if you're some random dude that supposedly supposed to keep me accountable and says, hey, dude, you're doing this wrong, I'm like, why do I need to listen to you?
I think it works the opposite way, actually, in our culture.
Yeah.
I think if we weren't close friends with you, Pastor Gene or Pastor Paul or anyone else, like, we wouldn't be able to tell you if you're doing something wrong. It is because that we are friends that we feel comfortable that we can tell you when you're doing something wrong, right? It's not this culture where, oh, you're this. I can't say anything. It's because you're this, I want to say this to you because I don't want you to look bad or do something that you shouldn't be doing, right? So to me, we have to be best friends. We carry a lot of burden in shepherding this church. I don't want to do that with people I'm acquaintances with.
I think people have this, just this notion that because you guys are elders, that I won't say anything mean ever to you guys. And I mean, they can't see your faces, but you guys are all laughing because that's not true. I won't say mean things, but you say mean things if it's necessary because you love the person. And I'm hoping that people understand that I love these elders as if they were my blood brothers, maybe even more so. I don't have a blood brother, but even more so that my life is theirs and my life is in their hands. And I would take it to that degree. I literally had people who aren't members of our church. They're like, well, I'm thinking about membership. I won't get into too much detail, but I'm thinking about membership, but I don't really like what this one elder did. So I'm really holding back. There are, people who have these misconceptions. Maybe they don't understand fully why an elder would talk a certain way or behave a certain way. And they're afraid of telling me until I sit them down and I almost have to pry it out of them. But then I tell them, if they are in sin, you don't think I would be the one to go and correct them? You don't think we don't have a relationship like that? And if I were to be in sin, you don't think they would be the first ones to come to me and say, hey, you can't do this? And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. Friends in real life means more than that. It means we're brothers. And we will stick our necks out for each other. Absolutely. But we will hold each other to account as well because of the love that we have, not because of some kind of formal check and balance that you see that the government should have, right? We're not, Sung isn't, Congress, and, like Jubin isn't the Supreme Court. That's not how we work here. And so I really had this romantic idea when I first became a pastor that we would be like Arthur and his knights at the round table where everyone just gets a vote. But I realized where that came from. The idea came from the Bible, where the apostles would sit together and they would be the people that Jesus would use to spread the gospel through the nations to the ends of the earth. And that's what we have to do as well. How important do you think an elder's wife is as you shepherd?
I think without the full support and unity, it's going to be difficult at best and impossible. As when you have a family, and when we have those late night meetings, that's just one part. But what it means to move as a unit.
Did Joy ever give pushback in you being a pastor?
No, I mean, she knew what she was getting herself into. So
You were a pastor before or after you got
I
married?
was in seminary
You were in
studying,
seminary, okay.
so it's not like bait and switch.
So she wanted to be a pastor's wife?
Yeah.
Anybody here got a bait and switch? Simon? No?
I mean, my wife was very supportive of the idea of me becoming an elder. She knew what it would entail. Like Pastor Paul said, late night session meetings, coming together as a session at other times to discuss church matters, to be involved in various ministries and to help shepherd the church, whether it means leading ministries or having one-on-one meetups with various members of the church. And she's very supportive of that. She understood what the time that might be required, and she's very encouraging every single day.
I mean, you've been an elder for 7 days, though.
Yeah.
So far, what was the latest meeting you've ever had?
Not very late. I mean, I've heard of late meetings from you guys, but so far the meetings I've been in, they haven't been as late as
We haven't really passed 1 o'clock yet, right?
Not
I
in
think,
a while.
I think
No,
12
we
for
haven't
a
gone
while.
that
Yeah.
far.
12
Like a
o'clock
little
was
over
probably the
12.
latest.
We've been going easy on him for now.
Now we're gonna switch.
Yeah.
No, we become smarter too.
Yeah.
Like when we
We're
did
a little
all
more
the
efficient.
agenda items in
That's
one night,
crazy.
sometimes it would take
Oh,
until like
yeah.
3 or 4, right?
Yeah,
AM.
crazy.
Yeah.
The budgets.
Wow, the
Yeah.
budget
Push
meeting was
stuff.
bad.
And so, yeah, absolutely. If your wife is not supporting you, that's rough. I don't know. I don't think you can be an elder.
No, I think like for me, it's even with the understanding of shepherding, right? Like having to meet with people, maybe like very last minute, and just Hannah's always very supportive whether it's church meetings, whether it's meeting with a member. But I think also for me, it's when just trying to get her perspective on certain things in certain situations. Maybe when we're hunker down in a room for talking about something for an hour, it's always good to kind of just see like an outsider's perspective, and just kind of getting Hannah's thoughts is something I try to do. And even when just having her support in the fact that like if it's been a rough day or it was a rough meeting, just being there to be able to have her just listen, or just to kind of maybe watch Willow for a little longer or something like that. But definitely it helps. It's an encouragement to have Hannah always on my side, always there whenever I need her.
You mentioned willow. Is that a tree?
Yes, we have a nice willow tree out in the back.
You gotta watch the willow
That's
tree in the
my
back. Wait,
our
what
daughter.
Was, what was your what was your inspiration behind naming your daughter Willow?
Well, Hannah came up with the name, and it can't. Willow was mentioned in one of the passages in Isaiah. We really liked the passage, and so we went with it. Plus, I really like the name Willow. It was a nice movie too.
A long time ago.
Long.
I think they're
time
trying to
ago.
remake that into a woke version. But
Isn't
anyway,
it a
Yes,
TV
It
series
is.
now?
Yeah,
It's not
right?
very good.
Not very good. Okay, that's unfortunate. What if someone disrespects you? I suppose, even if you're not in this church and you're listening, you can kind of understand this. People disrespect you. People disrespect elders to their faces sometimes, but a lot of times behind their backs. So, do you put them on the church discipline? What do you do? Do you just take it?
If I saw them disrespecting another elder, I might just put them under literal physical discipline right there on the spot.
That's
Oh.
the
Are
hot.
we
That's
talking-
a hot
are we
take.
talking about
That is a
Levi here,
hot
your
take.
son?
Do not edit that out.
Physical discipline. What do you mean? You're gonna get a stick out? What's going on here?
Non-violent, Driven. Non-violent.
But I mean, if it was directly to me, I don't know if I would have any like reaction to it or response, but maybe I'd have to get them. It's probably because of some kind of misunderstanding. Probably have to talk to them more if they're willing to even talk. Yeah.
I think it's like depending on like what happens, right? Like I think we've always tried to make sure we understand what's going on and have a sit down with that person. But I think what I've definitely learned from Pastor Eugene over these last 6 years is that if one of the elders is disrespected in any way, it's pretty serious, right? And we need to make sure we stand up for one another, but we also need to talk to that person. And so again, I guess depending on what it is, like, we've tried our best to make sure we don't go straight to discipline. Always trying to do our best to take our time, figure out what exactly happened, why one of us was disrespected, or maybe the entire session, whatever it is. Like, I think we do our best to discern what's going on and not be too quick. But
Because you could be
Yeah.
wrong, right? We could be wrong too. And if we're wrong, and maybe it came out badly. They said it in a disrespectful manner, but what they said was truth. I think we should take the baby and not throw it out with the bathwater in that sense. We have been disrespected as a session from outside places too, but I think the thing that I kind of get is when you find disrespect come your way, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's misunderstanding, like you said, but other times people are just doing that to test your mettle. They want to see if you what you're made of, but they want to see if you can still stay above reproach, even if they fling, dung at you, that kind of thing. They want to see if you can still manage to keep afloat. I think that in that sense, people see elders as politicians. But for me personally, I think if they're a member of our church, it's more of how can I make it a teaching moment? How can I make it a moment where I can show them that an elder isn't a politician? How can I show them that an elder is supposed to be in charge of their soul? So they're supposed to care for them in that way. So I see some of that stuff. There's a lot of, I guess, examples that we could talk about, especially with the disrespect outside the church. Like Hoyoung's face lit up. You can't see it right now because we don't have a video podcast. Hoyoung's eyes just lit up on that one.
All right. So for me, there are three places or three people and groups where I feel like I can be completely honest, right, and not care about how people respond. That's the session in our session meeting. It's by my brother and my wife. And when it comes to a place where I feel disrespected or frustrated, I just unleash my anger, not at my wife, but to my wife. And she helps, she either gets angry with me and we get angry together, or she'll give me different perspectives. And that helps me a lot because I think when it comes to actually addressing the issues at hand, I'm able to kind of be a lot more self-controlled and in my responses and how I speak with someone. I joke with my wife, I've never had to eat disrespect or comments that were said about me more than in my short period as being an elder, because it's not worth the response, right? And I think Pastor Eugene is correct. People want to test your patience. And for me, I've had to, and I'm not one typically who's able to, keep my mouth shut. So I think in that way, God has matured me in certain regards, but I'm glad that I have the men here, my wife, that I can kind of do that because it helps the manner in which I respond, right? If I didn't have that, then my response would be very, very bad. For the church.
We're talking about, we're talking about outside of church a lot. We're referencing more outside the church because inside the church, what we've tried to foster is a culture that is just, encouraging. We want to stir one another up to good works. I think when people walk into our church, it's not a hostile environment. People aren't up in arms. They're not always second guessing. They're not questioning each other. And I think it takes time for you to get that culture. For us, it took time. I mean, we're 6 years old now, and it took time for us to get to that culture. Even in the very beginning, people would ask questions because that's what they were used to. They thought that we should ask these questions almost in a hostile manner because I need to keep you in check, because if I don't keep you in check, you're just going to be corrupt, that kind of thing. But as we adhere to the word, as we see that we're supposed to follow sound doctrine as the Bible teaches us, the admonishment takes on a different flavor. The culture that we have, it looks a little bit different than it does in the world, perhaps very different. And so even when someone disrespects us, I think, you guys answered this way, but we see it differently. Hopefully, this is not just something that the elders do, but this is something that the entire church does. And I think I can speak for our church when I say this is what our church does when they see disrespect. We try to continue to foster a culture that's not hostile, but rather welcoming, that's understanding, that covers, for love covers all wrong, right? So that's what we want to continue to do. I think that's a good segue to continue on with the next set of questions. And that is, who is your favorite child? Hoyoung?
There are seasons. I would actually love to hear Pastor Paul's response to this question.
Pastor Paul, you've been silent for the last few questions. Yeah, who's your favorite child, Pastor Paul Jang?
Well, Hope is my favorite daughter.
See, that's cheating.
And Martin's my favorite eldest son. And Calvin's my favorite youngest son.
All right, I have a question for the two of you guys. Esther or Ellie?
I mean, Elizabeth. Did I take long enough to answer the question though?
Joy or Hope?
Oh, I mean, my wife.
Oh, wow.
No, this is what Esther always rags on me at home. She's like, "You love her more than you love me." I was like, "Is this a test?" Because if so, I may fail this. But yeah, I mean, if you don't know the dynamic between me and my wife, we joke around a lot, and we rag on each other a lot.
Who jokes more?
I think I joke more, but every once in a while she'll pop in one that just like, yeah, almost, blow me out of my shoes. So they're pretty good. As I'm eating something, sometimes she goes oink oink, eat it, piggy, which is a reference from a TV show, and so I appreciate that about her. I made her watch this one TV series, and sometimes she quotes it back to me. But it's just some lighthearted questions. But favorite book, chapter, verse in the Bible? Anybody have one that want to share with the rest of the podcast listeners?
I think I shared this before, but I really like Book of Psalms, and I also like Proverbs. I would pick like a gospel. I mean, I like all the gospel, but right now I enjoy John.
I think for me right now, Proverbs 3, chapter 3, just talks about wisdom, basically, and not relying on yourself, but having reliance on God when you're talking about wisdom. And I think that's, I'm in a season where I'm going firm back to chapter 3 more frequently now than ever.
I usually am reminded of Philippians 3, especially when I'm either struggling or tired. It's the part where Paul mentions pressing on toward the goal, the prize that is Christ. And it's an encouragement because he goes through before that all of his qualifications in the world as like the perfect citizen. And then it says, but all that stuff is useless. All that stuff you're like striving for to be, have the perfect job, have the perfect house and the car and kids and all that stuff, trying to get your life together. That's all useless. And if you're getting tired because of all that, or you're ready to give up, just imitate me, like, press on toward Christ, because that is your ultimate goal. So it's been a great encouragement. Try to remember that, when things are tough and I'm just like, there's so many things I need to get done today. I'm tired of this. I don't have time to do anymore. So yeah, that's the verse I always go back to.
Right now, I'm going through the book of Mark, just kind of like a daily devotional. It's like a expository book on Mark. Just kind of goes through chapters, like verses each day. And 12 days ago, I was doing Mark 8 and just Jesus feeding the 4,000. And just, I think it was a good reminder of, like, especially as an elder, like how we're supposed to care, not just for our congregation, but as a Christian. Like, Jesus also knew that there were non-believers within that 4,000, and so he still loved and cared over those people. And so, the struggles that we see with the outside world, with non-Christians, non-believers, it's easy to just kind of hate on them, to dismiss them, but we see in Jesus' example that he still loved them, right? And we should still do our best to love and care for them. So it's just a good reminder. It's just with how dark the world is, just whether at the workplace or non-Christian friends, trying my best to continue to love them and not just love our church members or other Christians.
I always enjoy the book of James. I think James has so much rich wisdom in how to walk a good life, following the Lord, and not being able to tame your tongue, not desiring all the worldly riches and whatnot. So James is always good. It's a humble reminder for myself every time I read James of how I need to continue to mature and be sanctified on a daily basis.
I think these verses really, or the books that you mentioned, really shine a light on all your personalities. It's kind of funny. Yeah. Hoyoung's definitely a James guy. Pastor Paul is definitely someone like whatever he's reading, he's really into it so much that he's like, oh, this is my favorite. That's pretty awesome. If you could classify yourself as one type, and I wrote down 4 types. If you can find out more, that's fine. You could either be a jock, you could be a nerd, you could be a loner, or you could be a floater. What do you think you would be classified as? This is in line with the personality thing, that so people can kind of get to know you. Maybe they're listening to our Dear Church podcast because they want to get to know Elder Jubin. They have no idea what this man is about. They just see him with a frown in the back, and they're like, "Is this man ever happy?" He's always muttering Philippians to himself. And so, if maybe this can kind of help. What would you classify yourself as? A jock, nerd, loner, or floater?
You guys can answer this for me.
Little nerd.
Uber nerdo.
Yeah, I put myself as a nerd.
Uber nerd.
Yeah.
Okay, now you know. Jubin is a uber nerd.
What's a floater?
Someone
Like,
who goes between,
ever.
like all of them. Yeah, because some people are like, I'm not a jock, and I'm a nerd now. I'm not a nerd. I'm gonna be a loner, that kind of thing. So I just gave him another one, a floater.
I don't know. I'd probably be a floater. Go between a jock and a nerd. I love my sports, but I also love some nerdy things like comic books and movies and all those things. So I kind of like to go back and forth.
How large is your DVD collection?
I don't know. It's in storage. It got up to about 500.
What's a DVD?
What's a DVD?
Do you now have soft copies? Or are you against soft copies? So people who are really avid collectors know what DVDs are, because soft copies can be ripped out from you at any time. They could just be like, we no longer offer this, and you paid your 20 whatever dollars. So some people who are collectors will have hard copies, and I guess the best way to store it is on a DVD. Some nerdy information for you all. Yeah. What about you, Sammy?
Sort of like Sung. I'm a floater. I go through seasons of being really into sports. I'm also, I probably consider myself a nerd. Same time. Have way too many electronics in my house to really do anything with it. More USB cables than Best Buy. Why I have so many? Ask my wife. She's like, "Why are there so many cables of the same type of cable in various rooms in the house?"
Okay.
Just in case.
Come
Yeah.
on.
Just in case.
You gotta be prepared.
I mean, would you guys agree that Sung and Sammy are floaters?
Yeah.
Sure.
Generally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give it to you.
Okay.
All right, fine.
Probably more of a nerd for me though.
Ho Young.
People would call me a jock, but I'm not as dumb as people might initially think I am.
But you are a jock.
Sure. I mean, if Sammy brought his electronics over, I would not know what to do with that stuff. So
I mean, he's a
know.
valedictorian jock.
I would
and
be
he's
a
a
smart
You can't be
valedictorian.
dumb.
So you could be a smart jock.
yeah, I always tell people I'm not as dumb as I look. And people get very
Scholar.
confused.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, my past life, I was more of a jock. Probably like a barstool sports type of guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess you can't be an elder without reading a few books. Huh? And so, yeah, in our church, our elder training is about, how many books was it this year when you had that 6-month training?
A lot of books. It's at least 10.
Yeah, at least 10. But yeah, so I guess you got to be that. I don't think I have to ask Pastor Paul what he is. You can hear it in his voice. He is total jock. Total jock. Okay.
Thank you. His boys would be proud.
Don't believe it.
All right. And our final question for today's podcast is, this may be the hardest question for all of you. And I say this without reservation that it may be the hardest question that I ask you in this podcast today. And that is, what is Sam's greatest quality?
Can you leave the silence in the mix?
I just see a bunch of shaking heads,
A lot of goose eggs.
hands over mouths, some uncomfortable smiles.
Sung's thinking really hard right now.
He just had a kid. We should be nice.
We should be.
Nice, but honest, right?
Yeah, don't lie. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week for our post-Christmas episode on a topic that is TBD. Tune in next week to find out. And we hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith. Peace.